Hello, and thank you for taking the time to review the EIOBoard customer hosted or intranet installer process. When you first come to our site, one of the things that you can do is sign up for a free trial, and part of that, the option that we're going to talk about today is the customer hosted. The EIOBoard hosted trials, you don't necessarily need to install anything on the server. All you have to do is download the clients and begin using it immediately. But we're going to focus on the customer hosted. So the first thing you do is go ahead and agree to some terms, and then from there you put in your name, last name, company name, email address, phone number, how you heard about us, your preferred username, and then your password. And then you'll want to pick your users, because if you're testing things out like Active Directory, Sync, or other things like that, you'll just want to make sure that you pick up the right user level. So you pick your user level, you'll end up getting a registration successful. At that point, Savance has some work to do to make sure that you indeed are the person who you say you are. And at that point in time, we'll go ahead and actually accept your trial. At which point you should get an email. And once you actually get that email, you should be able to come in and you'll have an email right in your inbox that'll tell you what your information is to basically sign up for that trial, and it tells you where to download the Intranet installer, where to download the Active Directory sync, where to download the EIOBoard application, the Outlook add-in, and so on and so forth. Now, I've gone ahead and downloaded everything and put everything in this folder here. So the first thing I'm going to launch is the Intranet installer. Now when I launch that, it's going to go ahead and basically walk you through a similar wizard as if you're installing a simple application. Obviously a little more detailed since there's a lot of options as you're installing this, but that's the reason why we're going to take you through the options here. So it's going to ask you for this installation key, which again I pulled from my email. If you look inside here, it gives you the installation key, and I just copied and pasted that right into the installation key. Now you'll want to make sure that you have internet connectivity. That's a requirement. We actually authenticate you via the internet. So at this point in time, this key validates, and then at that point in time you can install to a certain directory. Now this installer is both for a brand new install as well as it'll automatically detect an upgrade. And if you happen to be out of support, the way that our installer works is basically you can only install up until the point you've already installed on the same server you've installed. So keep that in mind. Now it's gone ahead and it's defaulting to a particular folder. I'm going to opt for the option of install the application as a service. Now at this point I have some options to specify some SMTP options. So I'm going to go ahead and put in ours. If you have a username and password you want to use for emailing and your SMTP server requires authentication, then you'll want to put that. Now at this point you're given some options. Do you want to install SQL Server Express, which is the default? And for the average user, that's probably the approach they'll take. It'll install the engine that has all the database and information inside of it. If you're an advanced user where you already have a SQL server on site and you want to leverage that SQL server, you would choose the second option. If you wanted to skip the database altogether because maybe you were needed some specific need where you already had a database that was already upgraded and all that other stuff, this is a very rare case that you might choose this, and probably with Savant's assistance. The final option here is to migrate an EIOBoard database and upgrade it to the latest, and this is very handy if you're doing an upgrade where the server is a different server and you want to migrate to the new release and either point to a backup file that you've created, or you want to basically real-time point to that database, pull that information over and upgrade that database on the fly. So I'm going to choose the existing SQL server only because I already have it installed, but this first option would quickly go through it. It would download the necessary installation files for the SQL Express and run it from there. For me, I'm going to go ahead and put my SQL Server name in here. I can also browse and search for it that way. I'm going to put my SA password here, and I'm going to put I'm going to make my database EIOBoard. Hit next here. And now basically this is going to talk you through setting up IIS. And you have two options here, either a virtual directory or an existing website. If you don't know the difference, go ahead and stick with virtual directory. If you have already set up a website, you set up some advanced settings to that website, you can say existing and then just pick that. I'm going to pick a virtual directory, at which case I'll be given all the websites that are on this server and pick the website that I want to basically add a virtual directory to. Now at this point I'm given the option of what do I want the directory to be. I'm going to accept the default here. And then at this point in time I hit next, and it'll basically go through and run a series of steps, one of which is to make sure that the system already has .NET 2.0. If it doesn't have .NET 2.0, this is the point in time where it would download it from the internet and install it. The other thing that it'll do is enable ASP.NET 2.0, and this is because oftentimes if IIS is installed before .NET 2.0 is installed, there can be an issue. So we basically, as a precautionary measure, always apply a patch that fixes up ASP. Then at this point it runs some tools. It'll go ahead and update your IIS and set that up and set up the system. And then finally it'll start to apply the database and build the database accordingly, copy the appropriate files, and you'll be done. Now when you go through this, obviously you can just wait for the thing to finish, and you'll be in good shape. So here it's copying over all of the ASP files, and then finally it's copying over some server controls, installing the service, creating the database, applying the database structure. This often takes a little bit of time here as it builds the new database structure and sets up your own username and your own password and customizes the database engine for your particular requirements. And then finally it's creating the virtual directory, where it'll end up being /EIOBoard, so it'll be your website /EIOBoard. So whatever your server name is, or if you have a DNS alias set up or something like that, we're actually having a virtual directory on the end of that, so it'll be http://server name /EIOBoard. And that'll be applied to the clients as well. So when you go to point your client at the server, you'll want to do that. One of the other steps here is it installs the web service, which the web service is used to communicate through the newer platforms, our Outlook add-in, our kiosk, our AD Sync, a lot of the engines. That's our communication method moving forward. The VB6 application that we have actually references a XML document. So, and finally we make sure ASP.NET 2.0 is enabled. We restart IIS, which obviously you want to be careful that you're not on a production server during production hours doing this, because we do stop IIS and start IIS throughout this process. Now it validates the install. And you'll notice here I'm doing this actually on an XP system. This system is actually supported on any server platform, server 2003, server 2008, 32-bit, 64-bit, and basically any system that can run a server platform can run our software. So we often get a lot of questions where, hey, what are the minimum requirements? And basically, if the OS can run or if the system can run the OS, then it will definitely be able to run our software. The other question we get a lot of is how much space you're going to need. And we use a reference of our production database, which is still under 2 gigabytes as of today. And we've got literally thousands and thousands of users. So, depending on how much you actually intend to use this, you're not going to see substantial growth, which is a good thing. And another question that we often get is, do I need SQL Server, or can I live with not having SQL Server? And that's obviously a choice on your part, but the edition that we deliver is called SQL Server Express, and that is supported with up to 4 gig of database, and there's no user limitation. So the nice part is it's a runtime engine, and you don't necessarily have to upgrade to SQL Server. And since I just noted that our production database with thousands and thousands of users is still under 2 gig, for most applications the SQL Express engine will be fine. Now it'll launch your basically the browser edition here, in which case you can add users, that sort of stuff. You can also leverage the application to add users. So remember, inside of the application, that's kind of our master administrator. That's our most enhanced administrator that's available at this point in time. And you'll be able to download that part of your email. It gives you the opportunity to download that. And that's a client application. You're welcome to install it on the server, but it is actually designed as a client application. Now, inside of the administrator, you can do things like manage your groups, manage your statuses, manage your users, review a bunch of company settings, look at what you're configured for, and manage resources. Now, remember also, as you're deploying your clients, you'll want to set whatever your server name is / whatever virtual directory. If you didn't use a virtual directory, you don't need to adjust that. You would just put the server name by itself, and then the chat server is going to be the actual PC. And you'll want to make sure that the server is not blocking port 5222, as well as every client cannot be blocking 5222 if you want chat to work. The other thing to note is that if you want to have kind of a jump start on deploying this, I encourage you to take a look at the Active Directory tool. There's actually a video that details this whole application in detail. I'm going to start it up and do a quick Active Directory sync just to show you quickly what it's all about and how to add users. So this is actually a service that, again, this is a server-side service. It's a Windows service that gets installed, and it's going to point to whatever directory you have set up. You'll end up, again, this is the same. I could put my server name here instead of the 127. You have to put in an administrator that can add users into here, and this is an EIOBoard administrator, and there's an option to test the connection. And then Active Directory is going to basically pull all of your, you have to put the server for an Active Directory on your network, a valid username and password that has administrative privileges to this Active Directory, and then the domain and the extension for the domain. So now at this point in time, and it looked like I got a little warning that I actually might have put an invalid username and password, so I'm going to try some things here. I'm going to test this connection. I'm going to come back here, make sure I did this, test this connection, hit OK. And now at this point in time, I should be able to open up the Active Directory configuration tool, and I'll basically be mapping to my default organization. As a rule of thumb, you can from an administrative standpoint, you can create multiple organizations. So if you have a company with, 3,000, 5,000, 6,000 users, some people will opt to break that up into different organizations. And then once they break up those organizations, they'll apply a template that maps to that organization. Now, in my example, I'm just going to pull in some users here. There's a couple users that aren't really users that I'm going to pull off of here. And then at that point in time, I'm going to basically pick up all these real users here. There's also a user under this org unit. I can pull them back as well. And then I'll save this template because this is a tool that will synchronize every day or every week. All that's covered in the AD Sync overview. But at this point in time, I'm just going to do what's called a manual sync, which will take all these users and push them out into my database and synchronize them. So even if it's a very first time load, it's nice to do. Now you'll notice that it actually pulled all of my information from AD and pushed it over. It was an update. The rest of these were an insert. So now quickly I have just loaded a whole group of users into here rather than having just a few users. So the nice part is that just being able to come back in here where we had nothing, I refresh this and here's everybody in my Active Directory in all of my different interfaces, so I can pick and choose. So that pretty much covers a little crash course on the Intranet installer. There's also a user manual available if you want to take a look at some of the more detailed as you take a different path, whether you're installing the Express Edition, or you're picking your SQL Server, or you're doing an upgrade and restoring from a database, or if you're just doing an upgrade. All of those different paths are covered inside of our user manual. And if you have any questions, one of the primary benefits of our company is that you can actually talk to somebody live, and we also have online chat support, and we also have email support that you can do that's built into the product, as well as you can reach right from our website. So I encourage you to actually get to take the trial yourself, install this on your server, and if you have any questions or problems, please feel free to give us a call.